Impressive things I've seen in Catania. Obviously the most impressive thing in this bus station area, which is really a really gnarly area to say the least, and that's being gracious. We'll see that in a moment. But this is an impressive fountain and statuary, something one would expect in Rome. Look at her hand on that horse's hoof. There's something poignant about that. And just a pan across the tracks at the train station to the Mediterranean Sea. And I don't know if we're just in an inlet here or that's Tunisia or something. I don't think so. I think we're in some kind of an inlet. The Etna is spewing out lava now. And that's what that cloud is, and also what that looks like, smoke and steam in that valley. From Taromina tonight I can see the fire of the volcano. So we will hike up to Casteltaormina, which is a small little town, up these stairs, and then there's another place we can hike up, I think even farther up to the top. That's the first challenge for today, and then if I understand my instructions, we can come down a pathway that goes somewhere off to the right. I think this is symbols to allow us to empathize with Christ by our climb up these stairs, although frankly they're not that wicked yet. It's almost the Stations of the Cross, but I don't have the energy to stop and figure that one out. Moving from the train station in the bus up to Taromina, this big ship was, or this large ship, not it was a big ship, and there were 2 or 3 mid-weight cruisers streaming across there and their lifestyle. This is interesting. I wonder how often it happens. I think that's the birth of Christ with the 3 wise men. On the crest of that hill we can see the Greek amphitheater. Now I think I'm starting to empathize, but not too much farther. Gates into something. Been precarious, whatever it was, because that right there is the edge of the cliff. The top is a church, so we'll go look at it. It looks like quite a modest church. A novel church because it's built underneath a rock outcropping, apparently. Now secured with cement somewhat. It has what look like 2 altars. Views for the parishioners. A couple of confessionals. Mary. And that bench may be for the church elders. I don't know if this means it's an entry into a convent. No, what these are for. Although that set of worry beads is interesting. And more than one. Maybe it was just carried like a necklace or a brooch. What a spectacular view. I want to find my way up there, which I think is a fortress. I'm not quite sure how to get up there. No one here seems to know. Apparently the castle is closed. Those who want to live in this kind of an area This is probably a pretty ideal piece of property. Your own driveway, garage if you need it, but it's probably just a storage unit. There, a view of Etna. Spectacular view that includes Etna, the hill, the mountain of Etna, and then down to the ocean and Taromina beneath it. There's some smaller properties across the street that would be equally desirable from their view, although you'll notice they haven't taken advantage of it except for the patios. A la Jackson Hole and Walgreens. This huge metal fence to stop the rocks, but they're installing right now a mesh fence against the wall, which makes you wonder about that building there and the other. How prey are they? An idea how steep this walkway is. It is steep up here, and we're still not there. And those 3 steps, I think I'm up at the top. And there's the castle that's never open. Go figure. Maybe cables to literally hold the mountain in place, not just the castle. I would look at the old commander and tell him I ain't coming up that hill. For which I would probably end my career and life immediately. I guess if I were in the mood, you could continue to go up to that house and up to that building. Stairs or terracing.
I believe it's this,
Nie masz linii, jakichś linii.
no? Tu są linie.
Really an incentive not to hit the ball too hard. Spectacular location and a very expensive piece of real estate for a tennis court, but a great motivation not to hit the ball too hard in the air. Down there, if you look, it's terraced, although to the right those terraces seem to flow down at an angle which doesn't seem logical, unless they're not terraces and merely striations, but I don't think so. Further up on the other side of that road, they're horizontal, terracing all the way up that hill. Even vaguely appears to be subtle remains of terracing on up through there. I wonder if they suffered the same issues on which crops would grow at different elevations that the Incas did. What's interesting is the expense of that spiral staircase up to that little doorway. It looks like it could only be a storage area and a loft. Maybe that's it. They're a nice little balcony setting. But a lifestyle where you have to drive up this hill. Wouldn't want that, really. Church sits now in an artist studio or gallery. The tourist drag up here. Restaurants and all that sort of thing. The hotel, I don't know how far down this goes. I'll probably return down the walkway that I came up. I'll start down here and walk up and see if there's anything interesting in tourist land. The ice cream is I can go down here to where I saw a sign pointing to the Duomo. Everything down here is probably well maintained or abandoned for temporarily. It's just too expensive an area not to be in some state of active control, although this makes you wonder here. Looks like it's in a state of restoration. Whether the crisis stopped this dead in its tracks, who knows? It doesn't look like anything's happening right now. Remains of an old scene, an old palazzo. Palazzo. Downstairs looks like an antique shop playing opera, which is lovely. Interesting, maybe associated with the Duomo here beside me. In a small enough car, you can probably negotiate all this area. It's amazing these little cars have the power to come up that hill. And here a building, I assume, associated with this cathedral that we're standing in front of. Interesting to see the Star of David in a church, but then realize that I've in the past discovered that it's been used interchangeably with several religions, I believe. This is interesting. If you could read it, you might know what its importance was. Don't see a wooden ceiling often. Simple bruschetti with just tomatoes, onions, and don't know what else is in there. Put whatever you want, but it's the crispy little thins of bread. This may be somebody's home, but when you look inside, it's a very pretty garden area. The ideal that I think about when I look behind, or try to look behind these stone walls, and notice that looks like a little well in there, and it probably was a very old well or cistern, even with the pulley and so forth up on top. Way back up the hill, encountered this lovely little shop with a nice display of things for the tour. I've seen in great profusion all over Italy or Sicily, and probably all made in China. It's possible to take the inner bust back down to the bottom, but it just seems strange to have invested all the energy to get up here by foot and then take a bus down. Here's where the workmen were working. They're on a break right now, apparently. Isn't this a spectacular community, though? If you have a reason to be here. It's most well known in a dramatic way for the people who bring their big yachts here. Walkway, I came up there and then down there past that place where that man's having that bulldozer work. Looks like a relatively small house with a big deck up on top, but more beautiful is this garden area and patio area down below. Small replica of that device we saw in the church for ringing bells continuously. Except this one just rotates it continuously. A little house that looks like it has a cage over there or something, but it looks like it's the Parthenon model inside, and in the back you can see another type of old architectural remains of a temple, but with a lot of foliage. And then once upon a time, this area right below me here was a patio area. All this here, just this narrow little strip that with the spectacular views, but it's all done now. Like the House of Seven Gables, like the person who lives in the house now is the person who was here 50 years ago, but they've lost the energy to keep up with the property. Here, a building that was started and stopped. Walkway down to that patio area, and there another storage area underneath, and a stairway that went down here all covered with grass, and then a metal stairway that went down to somewhere. Used to be the entrance all blocked up. Now what a pretty place it would be. What a pretty place to live, to have as a vacation home if this was an area you wanted to spend time in. Casa Gigi Semperi. Maybe she lives somewhere else now and only occasionally visits here. She's made cactus out of stones. This was a place that a woman really loved once upon a time. Maybe this area was also part of her land, and maybe that's where that metal stairway gave her access to. Also might have been a little home, now totally abandoned and run down. What a cute little place this is. That was number 101 via Leonardo da Vinci, right at the corner with Via Branco. Not that long ago that it was abandoned. It's been scraped by vehicles. Clever she was to make this flat cactus decoration out of stone, so that at first I didn't even notice it was made out of stones. And here a place that looks like it's overlived in. Quack, 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 quack. Quack, 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 quack. Just occurred to me, I don't think I see anybody over in the Greek theater. I wonder if they've closed that. I hope not. That's incredible condition, it looks like. That's all original, but I'm not sure that it is. Oh, there's somebody there. Okay, that's good. Literally just down the hill from my hostel is this Odeon. Well, the Odeon was partly uncovered in 1892 to 93 using brick-faced concrete technique, except for the rear quarter, a later addition. The cavea, resting partly on natural rock. 11 rows of seats divided by 3 staircases into 4 cunei or sections. The 8th row up from the orchestra served as a gangway, being slightly wider than the rest, and the 2 vomitoria or passages opening onto it. Part of the brick-faced pulpitum or stage front survives with a semicircular niche. But the wooden stage was laid on the steps of a 3rd century BC temple, which served as a backdrop to the Odeon. So there's the Odeon, and here's a temple that apparently was built in this area. That may be that one that's the BC, which would put it before the Romans. Interesting. This may be the floor of the temple or the floor of the church. Can't tell. Old column. This may be a recent construction. Can't tell for sure. This may be that back corridor they talked about, which was added after the theater. Cool. This may have been the way people came in to get to their seats. And notice that it's using this brick, which was typical of Roman, believe it or not, when they weren't using stone. You sit here, you wonder, what was this little niche, rounded niche for? Some kind of religious thing? Remaining stone from the outside. There's the back of the seated area. Obviously not fully excavated out because there's a street here. Not enough to get a clue. It's pretty steep seating, it looks like. See some incising, this X, in all of the seats. And when it looks like those stones would have been covered, although that I can take that back. This may be one of the stairways that went up right here into the seating. So here a small lapidarium of pieces from something in this complex, whether it was the Roman or the early temple or the later church. Don't know. This stone is interesting. for its carving. And you wonder what was in the center. Perhaps some kind of initials of something. So this would have been the theater stage. Can't see anything of the back of it, but this kind of gives us a idea of the dimension of the theater. See, it was relatively small and modest, but what you would expect for example, our neighborhood theaters would be the same way for stage productions. It's here that there's these half 90-degree chunks, triangular chunks of brick also. And notice that in that X in those stones, even the ones that are going to be covered. Although here, this is one of the walkways up into the theater seats area. This is that one over there. I don't know what that entered into. It looks like that was the grade right there somehow. These look like temple base. Here's some church. It's interesting old lion. It's like we're in tourist row now. Another wooden ceiling, not that often seen. Somewhat Casa Professa-like. Can't tell whether that's a tapestry or not. For other parts of Europe, you would think it was a tapestry. We'll go in closer just to see if it's a tapestry. Doesn't appear to be. Probably the remains of an earlier church. It's interesting because it looks like the worked stone is on the bottom of that wall. But that looks like a wall that might have been added to the main wall of that big stone. And there you can see the paving of whatever this earlier structure was. Had little lights on it too. Just a tourist alley, better to roam this at night or early in the morning. Here we're at the site of the Roman baths. Some of the columns and bases that would have been used. Some more over there just lying about. Hard to identify for sure what we're looking at. But if this was a floor, then down below was either a pool, like a cold pool or a hot pool, or just a lot of steam underneath there. What's interesting, I've never seen this kind of feature, like a chimney or something of that nature. But notice, if that's legitimate, it's got plaster on the inside of the walls. And down there, what would have been apparently the floor surface. Don't see any mosaics. I don't know if those over there are. But these little piles of round stones and little piles of square stones were, of course, what they put the floors on, and then had heated water or heated air going underneath them. I don't know whether that heated air percolated up or not. There usually was a section for men, for women, often a place where you could buy drinks, and also a room for exercise or small sports like wrestling. And here perhaps we see the last remnant of a full column of stones supporting the flooring. Well, that flooring looks pretty darn thick, doesn't it? You wonder how heat would percolate up. Was the whole thing like a sauna, or was it like a steam room? I don't know. Flooring just looks like a thin layer, relatively thin layer of plaster. Is it possible they plastered and then painted it? And there, that arch probably representing a pathway for the steam or water, or both. This is the tourist gauntlet up to the theater, the Greek theater. It looked like an 1865, painting in 1778. Here I'm at the top of the theater, at the very back. Probably here was a covered archway that gave access to the seats from the top, just to fly and guess, I don't know. Much of this is missing. It's wood, it's stone, it's all gone, except for that area over there we'll go take a look at. When the Greeks had it, there was no big back wall to it. They wanted to be able to have that Etna in the background of this magnificent theater, particularly, can you imagine over there, which we'll go see. It was the Romans who built this big wall, apparently to block that for some reason. Notice all along this walkway here are niches for some purpose, perhaps statues. There are remaining sole column base. I don't know if the Roman walls went higher than those two big corners sticking up there. That seems to be the highest grade. There's another corner of that building over there. My guess is that all that looks like building, like square, is Roman. I don't know about the columns, though. They certainly must have looked pretty. This would have been a magnificent view with out in Mount Etna right in the center. This mountain off to the right, and then this escarpment to the further right. Here a little bit of remaining columns, so it would have been columns all the way around. That would have looked pretty. Particularly if these niches, and notice that some were round and some were triangular, alternating it seems like, were filled with statues of some sort. It looked like arches, and that might have been for the vomitoria or the tunnels that gave you access to the theater seats. Again, is all this Roman? I would think so. These have the designs of the Greek seats that we've seen, but not made out of rock like this. It'd be uncomfortable to sit on. But then maybe people brought things to sit on just like we do. But I don't know if this is Roman or even a later period of time, or maybe even was the original Greek. This looks like it might have been a big vaulted corridor then filled in to make a room or something. There you can see how that curved rock, like those pieces we saw earlier. Gardens maybe down here, and I think we can get access to those for free. Stones would suggest the kind of seats that we're talking about, but it's not one complete seat. But maybe this was done differently so that your feet sat on gravel and your butt sat on what then might have been a clean stone. You see the undercut of these stones. That's indicative of what we've seen. Collection of columns. Maybe these went to the back rooms where theater production equipment was. Maybe still is. As we know from the Colosseum, the Romans at least were great at building subterranean rooms. I don't know about the Greeks. And here you get an idea of how large the theater was. I don't know how many people it sat, but a goodly number for sure. And I wonder what it looked like with that big wall up there, and what there was on that wall that made it so important to have it, and what made it impressive when it was there. Especially at these columns have let them lie here. apparently where they fell in some antiquity. I've been in there, statues of the Greek literary heroes. How impressive this must have looked, though. But then, you know, in their day, they took it for granted. Same way if we see big giant columns in front of a skyscraper, we think the same thing. But they certainly built spectacular interiors also. You can imagine what these niches were filled with. Big niches with interior smaller niches. And here mosaics, where were they found? Were they on the entry floors and all of the floors that people walked in as we would put linoleum and that sort of thing? Was it that much taken for granted? The symbols of what we see here. Some whimsy. These holes probably just accommodating large sculptural pieces attached to the wall. Are we looking at original plaster? That white stuff in there? Surely they did something with the walls. These Greek stones, and then the Roman on top. This looks original, but well preserved. Imagine looking up at heights like this. Of course, I'm not sure we could have seen it. Notice that curve there. This would have been a curved, vaulted tunnel, if you will, onto the stage. Where we're walking now would have been a vaulted, curved ceiling. Imagine the actors and actresses that mastered their craft and walked onto this stage filled with the lust for success. It's interesting because the curve seems to suggest something about like that. So why? It's original Greek stone. And what was the purpose of those bricks that stick out a ways? Was that just merely a device for being able to put some decoration on the wall? Give it some kind of attachment? Huh. Current day actors' dressing rooms. Here we see some more of that typical thin layer of one material, like that brick has a stabilizing force. Another lapidarium. Doesn't look like much, does it now? But imagine some dude who chipped his way through life on stones like this. A slave, no doubt. These are of their cultures. Huh. Made out of soft pumice. The corridor that people are not going into, but it looks like it has a display of captured mosaics, if you will. And that's what it looked like, except it would have been plastered, I think. It may have had either mosaics or paintings on them. Maybe the stage up there. Possible the Romans installed mosaics here? And that these really are some remnants from this point? I can't believe that. I don't know if this will lead me to the public gardens, but it's a pretty walk anyway. No entry. It certainly is a pretty area. I'll just keep walking until I get thrown out. Actually looks maintained. They have a long, stiff walk back up if it was gated off down there. That's the hill where the castle is that I climbed up to earlier today, I'm guessing. Considerable investment in this area at one time. This is that private properties form the perimeter of this park area. And I am the only one here. Ho, ho, ho on that one. Now I enter the legitimate public park. Presumably I won't have to leap a gate to get out of here. This is a very pretty park, beautifully maintained, most un-Sicilian. pretty flowers. This is a very beautiful park. Wow. The Duchy of Caesar Park. So it certainly was owned by some wealthy person and only the nobility got in here. Strange and whimsical building. Half tree house, half church tower. Another similar structure. That first building we saw only from the front. Pretty dramatic for being a curiosity. Beautiful pine trees. People talk to the parrot like they understand their language, or any for that matter. All they do is talk loud, scare the hell out of them. Those are always pretty ducks. Two large pigeon-type birds duking it out. Another house, but not quite so much whimsy, at least on this side. Climbing up some stairs in that little house to look at the front. Those stones used in the terme, Roman baths, I believe. Shows you how we cannibalize the past, even when they knew they probably shouldn't. These buildings are kind of the centerpiece for very nice little squares, if you will, or parklets, for lack of a better term. Which also happen to include some military statuary. Interesting stonework also for a pavement surface. Looks like a scuba diver's bathysphere. So you actually sit in that chair and then operate it. Presumably this tank was not only the engine of propulsion, but carries the fuel, of course. It's just the fuel. That may just be the oxygen for burning it. Seem enough compressed air or gas to run it. This was a strategy of delivering a torpedo by the Italians. Another pretty view of the sea at Taromina. Panning up to where we climbed today, and then we climbed farther. Seems like a rarity of clay courts. They used to be fun to play on because you could slide. To orientate, it's Saturday morning, and I'm starting here at the little theater just to do a rundown to tourist row where the tourists aren't here, or most of them aren't, at least the buses full aren't. So that's across from Via Teatro Romano. This is really actually the main intersection inside the tourist area. I came down from up there, which is where my hostel is, and that's Hostel Taromina. It's the only one inside the town. By that I mean it's closer, I think, than 3 kilometers. That's Messina Portal, or Portal Messina. And down this direction, as you can see from those signs, is the Teatro that we visited yesterday, as well as the Roman baths, which are off to the left, and there are Greek baths there somewhere. So I said that we're going to go to the left towards the Simply supermarket and the Duomo. This is the main church at this intersection. I say that because there's always churches. Time to get here, or even earlier, because the tourists aren't here yet. They're still in bed, or the tour buses haven't arrived. About 10 o'clock that happens. So if you walk down through here, you'll see people getting set up. Cleaning's pretty much already been done. Probably an old palazzo, but you can't be sure. I can't be sure, but I think it is. I don't think it's a church. It didn't have a place for carriage unless grade was higher than it is now. Perhaps the prettiest window covers that I've seen. Almost every house has them, but not necessarily so on the upper floors. But in many cities they do. It provides protection from the sun as well as from your neighbor's eyes. Even now you can start to get the wafting smell of bakery goods from somewhere. Just faint right now. Here's a sign that says Mosaics, early 2nd century AD. Let's take a quick shot up there and look at that. So here's what it would have looked like design-wise, and we still may be able to see some of that, I don't know. The circles are supposed to be intersecting so as to create flower petals, and we see it most easily here, at least I do. It was probably in a peristyle of a private house. Peristyle means surrounded by columns, whether it's Greek, Egyptian, or Roman. Interesting, it's the 2nd century AD, but they say it alludes to, historically and architecturally, to the white floral arabesques. In other words, the Arabic graphics, and some polychrome examples of the African provinces, such as Sousse, Masque Mosaic in Tunisia, where the swastika pattern can be found, like in Taromina. They say that it precludes the change to polychrome mosaics. Not quite sure how to interpret that. It just may simply mean it precludes the difference or the shift from black and white to color mosaics. If there's anything to be seen, it's certainly quite faint. And I can just make out something on the left-hand side. So we're not going to get a good view of this, unfortunately. I can't get over this wall very well, but I can get the camera over it. So we can now see much better. I think that's exciting. Things like this are preserved. I wish it were protected better. Most places that have reacted to the tourist potential, and I fully appreciate that desire to do that. Everything has been modernized in the main. For a while, the Andre Guide, by the climate of Acadia, and they were attracted here. Interesting, it refers to another fellow, the great Irish writer, whichever one of those two it was, I don't know, but anyway, his lover, Alfred Douglas, known as Bosie. I think that was Oscar Wilde. Anyway, waxed on romantically about his lover and Taromina and his thoughts towards both. Excellent example of setup for the tourists. Via Namachi, I've been to the public gardens yesterday. It's very beautiful. I don't know what Namachi means. Much that we can find and see here that we can extrapolate into the past is always the question. The remnant of this old building preserved underneath, but also visibly so, on this new affectation of plaster, which is actually nicely done. The prettiest balconies I've seen of metal. It looks like the lower part are like fronds of vegetation, and then those lights above, of course, are very pretty. How much is real and how much is added? Sometimes it's difficult to tell. An atmospheric street, and then are the left. These are the views we all love, even though we know they're not authentic. They're just pretty. And here, of course, some of the buildings we've just looked at, as well as these others we may not, all being old buildings. What old means, I don't know. I'm guessing probably the 19th, maybe the 18th century. Field-sized garbage truck for a town this size with streets this size. La Foresta draws me down because of the name and that palm tree down there. We may find nothing. Don't exactly know what it is. My guess is today these are hotels completely surrounding us, but that's pretty nevertheless. But there's some very beautiful and I'm sure expensive places to stay. If staying in beautiful, expensive places is how you see travel. It's elegant evenings like this that people pay for. An old, pretty wealthy home, I would assume this one was. It's interesting that it has this entryway that goes down. Whether it always did, I don't know, but I assume it did. Here we're approaching the other portal, and I don't know what its name is. And here, a building, I don't know what it is, can't even make it out. But with a beautiful plaza here with probably magnificent views. And maybe I'll find a croissant to come back and eat here and get one right over there. This church, nicely restored, however that pinnacle on that tower almost looks brand new, but it could just be well restored. That wouldn't take much to get down to the soft undersurface of the stone. Piazza, 9 April, which must be an important day in Sicilian history, or at least in Taormina history. Here an impressive mosaic, but probably not necessarily new. And here the outside view of our portal. I don't know if this is an authentic, protected entry. Then very well modified for the Hotel Metropole. The nook and cranny is redone for the benefit and the allure of tourists. It says 1905. This has all the look of a church, or something to do with a church, but I don't know. Again, an expensive palazzo for this town in its early day. I wonder if there was artwork up there in that obvious site for some. It reminds me of Balboa Island, where I had a second floor apartment with a balcony right on the main drag, so you could just sit there and look at all the peeps. It was a cool thing. People scurry because things have to be done before the tourists get here. A modest house, really, but with someone's family crest discreetly placed. What this was a part of, I can't be sure. A pretty residence, embellished with those lovely vases and flowers. Just a little bit of architectural contrast. I don't know if the older, almost Arabic-looking affectation on that building is legitimate or not. What tourist who prizes shopping above all the pleasures of travel can avoid this setting? And notice how there's a glass panel in front of that window, perhaps to keep air from blowing in too intensely. I'm not sure what that is. This certainly looks old, doesn't it? And here we're approaching the back of a fortress-like church with a simple bell tower. Almost looks like it was added on. So let's go up and take a look at the front end. Beautiful door in the setting of its subject matter. Here, a lovely fountain that may spring forth water when the tourists get here. And it has some merit in this large square in front of what I think is the Duomo. I'll go up there and double check it in a moment. with a sign off to the right indicating Italian opera. Very tranquil subject scene. The birds flying in from above, probably representing the angels of heaven or God. The lambs below, probably human. And then Jesus, the protector and shepherd, in that role. Again, the wooden ceiling, very plain upper portion. I'm sure it reflects its style, whatever that is. Simple columns, a little bit embellished capitals, but otherwise devoid of much affectation, except for the side chapel allusions. I think this is a baptismal font. Pretty impressive, made of stone, and that metal top portion. And this may be, as was that statue, very old art that keeps being reinstalled as they've restored the church over the decades or centuries. It's interesting how churches, cathedrals with limited space, define their basic design with these side chapel allusions, if you will. This looking much like what I saw in, I think, Greece or Palermo, where the paintings had no faces. They're left blank. Perhaps because it's a face that is common to all humanity. Brilliantly catching the morning sun. Notice how that, instead of being positioned to the side as it is in many churches, places the chief honcho in this church exactly in the place of the king in all kingdoms, tribal to Great Britain or France, would sit. Tell whether this is just carved from stone or plaster, but obviously the Last Supper. I mean, I say obviously as the heathen I am. Last, privacy again. It is interesting, and I'll leave it at that, how the burning of candles in churches has now been modernized so that, in fact, you push a button after you put your money in, I'm sure, and then your little light comes on for some period of time. I wonder if you get more time if you put more coins in. I must salute the flag because that's my first time seeing it today. But here, wishing to be more authentic, you can buy a candle and put it on this offering tree once you put your money in. This is a direct historical allusion, and I could be dead wrong, to the earlier popes selling dispensations to whoever had the bucks. I assume the more you spent, the higher the probability, if not guarantee, of getting into heaven. Here's a little drinking fountain, at least a place where people can fill their bottles, and I assume they can safely, or it wouldn't be here. Pay for plastic glasses. And here another portal in the wall that surrounded the city at one time. Just wondering why I hadn't seen the extent, or you can see they do extend down, so let's follow them. We're at another archway in the wall, but it may have been a reconstruction. This whole thing looks like a reconstruction, frankly. I'm going to pursue this further down into this area because it looks pretty, and I can see the wall beyond. Here, incorporated into the wall, is this apparent church. Tranquil place to live. I assume this is a horse, but it's a little bit hard to tell. It looks like her right leg is broken off. There's somewhat of a Kermit look to her face. I say her on the assumption it is. The point of this art is in this old church yard, I don't know. There as well, that's pretty. If you could dig down, literally to water, on this high peak, or whether it just tapped into a cistern. The reflection of water down in there. The coin I dropped made a plop. My guess is that the sign on the bottom floor saying Vende means it's for sale. You wonder what inspired this commitment to this kind of artwork. That almost looks Egyptian, doesn't it? And this might have been like a cloister area for this church at one time. Even though cloisters normally are associated with monasteries, I guess, nunneries. Some old stone detail, but this is interesting because these columns were multi-sided rather than, I don't think they were fluted columns. Used the remains of Archimedes' slots, I think so. But would these square holes have held beams? Probably. There might have been a time when there was not a church here. Instead there were shops or houses or whatever. Although that hole goes straight through. And the little guys are out running about this morning, of course. He's not the brilliant green that we've seen, but pretty enough, of course. Started, but stopped. Now for sale. Why do I peck around in places like this? Because they're here. It represents what this place is right now. In these small ways it suggests ideas, aspirations that people had. A lifestyle that once existed and one that's currently existing. Poke through the wall at this point instead of through the portal itself. Soul food. That's who they're trying to attract. Lovely balcony views up there. And just to give you a complete taste of this intersection. And another large square, it appears. Here to the Simple Market. I'm just panning around so that we'll have seen this. And maybe Mount Etna. A little bit clearer view than we've had before. A fragment of the wall. Another little church. What it is, I don't know. It may actually be Taromina at some point in time, but I don't think so. Well, somebody went to considerable effort to create it, whatever it is. And somewhere here is Porta Catania. The Excelsior Palace. Very Arabic looking, very Arabic looking. Those are Arabic windows up there. Very Arabic. And just to do it, Mount Etna, quiet for the moment apparently. But in the last few nights apparently there was fire on the mountain. The name Excelsior Hotel almost looks oriental. And others freeload. Can you believe it? Opposite the Duomo, will go up in search of Hellenistic from 2nd century BC. Little church we visited, the Duomo, I think. Shouldn't call it little. Hellenistic mosaics, 2nd century BC mosaics. Somewhere up here. Looks like part of the ancient wall, doesn't it? Unless it's just a reconstruction. Maybe part of it is. This is what we're about to see. Combines polychrome, yellow, pink, red, gray, black, cut and polished pebbles and relatively large polygonal black and white terrace. There are 4 darting dolphins occupying the triangular-shaped corners. There were parallels in Athens, Delos, the island, and Etruria. And the unroofed area of the peristyle courtyard of a private house. Blocks of the colonnaded portico are preserved on the left side. So here we are. We'll take a closer look at a couple dolphins. Now as we look at these, imagine, or better yet, look around your house. Try to imagine what might be left 2,400 years later. And now, for archaeologists to, and tourists like me to ponder over. There's this area where the columns would have stood on that little raised portion of stone. A guy trying to add to the drama. A nice old building with an interesting archway there and an entry. Almost church-like. Interesting light fixture if it's original. Interesting affectations, no? This is the Hotel Victoria, and it may be the Hotel Victoria of Oscar Wilde illusion. This is a different hotel with what could be a pretty backyard, but really it's kind of just let grown wild. That may be the Hotel Victoria, or at least what's left of it. That is the Porto Messina entry into the main tourist road. Quiet 6 o'clock morning. I'm told that you pick up the bus to go down to the railroad station here where it dropped off, but I can't see any confirmation of that yet. I'm going to ask this lady. Well, I asked the first lady I saw where the bus was to go down to the train station, and on the assumption she understood what I said, it was not where the hostel said. It's about a block away from there. So I'm hoping I'm standing now in the correct spot for the bus. And the buses that I was at before, down there and to the right,